There's been a little bit of topical preaching, and that's difficult for me. Use part of that conversation as we ended our seminar today. Let me thank you guys for letting me come here. I hope the seminar has not been too steeped in theory. I didn't want to give a lot of statistics and a lot of psychology jargon. I did want to talk in terms of practical stuff. I recognize because of the time limit that my answers may have been short, might have been curt, might have sounded very sterile. I want you to please understand I'm a very compassionate person. And I understand when people are hurt, they will do irrational things to solve their hurt. I need to what? It's in my pocket, yeah. You're going to try to reload my thing here. I'm ashamed now to pull out my thumb drive because my wife bought me one that looked like a pistol, so I pulled the magazine out of it. Try to get on a plane with that, by the way. Let me just go ahead and just, if you ever want to just be searched, anyway. And I do want you to understand that when people are hurting, they will do or believe anything that they can to get relief. And I know some of you are hurting, and some of you known people are hurting. I don't want you to think I'm uncompassionate or cavalier, but I did try to give straight answers, concise answers, and kind of cut through some of the I guess you'd call it political correctness to give what I consider to be the best answer. If you look at the one suicide in the Bible that I believe falls under our discussion, there's several kings who killed themselves as an ultimate end, an act of war. Lots of the Old Testament deaths by suicide are in the context of a war. But when you get to the story of Judas, this will fit in with some things. Matthew chapter 27. When morning came, that means that Jesus had been in trial all night. So you go from sunset on Passover. It's probably not actually Passover. Passover fell on Saturday. Judas leaves the gathering of his friends, the other apostles, and he goes into the city and he leads the chief priests and the scribes and the soldiers to the Garden of Gethsemane. And is standing there, walks up to Jesus and kisses him on the cheek to identify him in the dark as this is the guy. And they arrest Jesus and they bind Jesus and they take Jesus into the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was a group of men based on the 70 elders that God told Moses to appoint. They ended up having 71. There's the big Sanhedrin and the little Sanhedrin. Their job was to vet the Messiah. Their job was to do the interview and say, this guy has the right resume, he's the Messiah. My very good friend Tim Orbison, his wife Libby, does not like it when you talk about what might have been going on in the mind of a biblical character. She says, if it's not in the Bible, you can't say that. And for the most part, I agree. But what was going on in the mind of Judas? He has seen this man tell a storm to lie down. He has seen this man tell a demon to get out. He has seen this man tell the dead to get up. Every single time they've come at him with trick questions and trap questions and intellectually dishonest questions, Jesus has either shut them up or made them fools. What's it going to hurt if he has one more confrontation with these guys? I mean, they're the Sanhedrin. If they talk to him, they'll recognize he's the Messiah. Or maybe Judas is, okay, all this love your neighbor stuff, we need to throw the Romans out, and we're not going to have a proper Messiah who's not a military leader until I'm the catalyst for making this thing happen. Maybe that's his motivation. I don't know. It's unscriptural for me to say so. This is what Scripture says. The morning came, all the chief priests and elders and the people plotted against Jesus to put him to death. And when they had bound him, they led him away and delivered him to Pontius Pilate, the governor. Then Judas, his betrayer, seeing that he had been condemned, was remorseful and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priest and the elders and said, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. And they said, what is that to us? You see to it. And he threw down the pieces of silver in the temple and departed. And when he hanged himself. Now the word hanged in the Bible typically means impaled himself. Even in the book of Esther, they're not talking about hanging people on a gallows. They're talking about sticking people on a stake. So Judas probably went out and threw himself from a high spot and landed on some sharp object to impale himself. That's why in the book of Acts it talks about he burst asunder and his bowels gushed out. So he makes a very intentional leap from a high spot onto something that will impale him and end his life. And Judas, seeing that he had been condemned. I really think Judas said, I'm going to initiate these activities, and he didn't see it going where it went. I run into people who want to end their lives, and it's because of the guilt of their past. I didn't think it would ruin my marriage. I didn't think it would ruin my job. I didn't think it would cause this kind of distress. I didn't think it would ruin my reputation. I didn't think it would end my friendship. I had no idea anyone would get hurt. And they began to live with this tether to the past that says they can't get past it. It's what we like to call in the trauma world implicit meanings. Now, an implicit meaning is basically a belief that you live with that you believe is true. A parent abuses a child. The child has the implicit belief something's wrong with me because my parents wouldn't beat me unless I was bad. A person gets sexually abused, and they have this implicit belief about what sexuality is. Little girls who are 17 years old and have the eyes of 32-year-olds have this implicit belief that sex is power and I can use it to manipulate people. People who are molested by male cousins or male uncles or have premature sexualization in a male-to-male experience have an implicit belief about their sexual orientation. All kinds of things happen in our lives, and we say, based on this piece of information, these are the things that I believe, and that roadmap, that implicit belief causes us to live out that life. A neuropsychologist shared this with me. This is an implicit message. Everybody in this room can take half those letters and read what that says. Is there anybody here who can't read that? Everybody here says, I can take this much information and I can come up with a meaning for that sentence. Anybody here not able to read that? Okay, let's read it together on three. 1, 2, 3. Ice cream is good. And 95% of the people I show this to can read that thing. I mean, it's just that's the way an implicit message works. You can see the tail end of a tail and go, that's a cat, that's a dog, that's a coyote, that's a lion, whatever. And we take little bits of information about our lives, something that was done to us, something that wasn't done to us, something that we did, something that we didn't do, and we say, based on this little bit of information, I can read that. Let's read it again on 3. Yeah. Not only does it not mean what you think it means, it doesn't mean anything at all. And people who decide to kill themselves often go, hey, I know what this means about me. I know what this means about God. I know what this means about my worth. I know what this means about my value. And in truth, not only does it not mean what you think it means, it may have no meaning at all, at least no meaning that should be valid in your life. And we live our lives tethered to a nonsense meaning. When someone treated you badly, when someone ignored you, when somebody abandoned you, when somebody put you up for adoption, when somebody raped you, when somebody molested you, it doesn't say anything about you. It says everything about them. When my father abandoned me, it didn't have anything to do with you as a child. It had everything to do with your father as a selfish person. And you did what you did when you did it because it was the only thing you could do at the time you did it. And we live our lives tethered to the past because we have this implicit belief that this says something about me. And in reality, what we think this means about us is just not true. That does not say ice cream is good. Now, it looks like it says ice cream is good. Everybody in the room said ice cream is good, but when you uncover the hidden part of it, it really doesn't say anything about you at all. It doesn't have a meaning. It doesn't mean what you think it means, and it doesn't mean what you thought it means. For every event that takes place in your life, everything that happens, you have a byproduct that is emotional. Your emotions come from God. Your emotions are hardwired from God. They are all valid. You can have every emotion that's able. You have the ability to emote. My wife said, that's not a real word. I said, look it up, it is. I bought a thesaurus that was blank. There are no words to describe how disappointed I was. Anyway, my wife said that emote is not a word. And everything that you can emote, God gave you the ability to emote. And emotions will bring us to balance and to harmony. Your emotions are information. They are not instruction. Godly sorrow works repentance that leads to salvation, not to be regretted. The purpose of guilt is a change in behavior. So when you have proper emotions and we use them properly, now venting anger is wrong, expressing anger is okay. Be angry and do not sin. Don't let the sun go down upon your wrath. If you keep anger in, it builds repression and depression. If you vent it, it creates destruction. But if you express it in a healthy way, you get balance and harmony. The problem is that sometimes we have emotions, and those emotions lead to destruction, distress, and dysfunction. That's when we use our emotions as instruction rather than information. Now, if you are using your emotions properly, that's not an issue of any clinical significance to me at all. My phone rings all the time. Got this family member, we've had this family tragedy, and there's a death, and there's complicated grieving. How long ago was it? It was Thursday. I said, I don't really need to see them for 2 weeks. Now, I'll let them come to my office and sit with me for the 50-minute session and tell you everything you're feeling here is normal and natural and healthy, and you'll get past it over time. But it's very expensive to have that conversation with me. Some people want to do that, and I do. I don't ever tell anybody they can't come, but I say therapeutically, if this is not changing frequency or intensity of these feelings in a certain amount of time, then let's talk about it. But right now, everything you're feeling is normal. That's the way people grieve. You're going to go through balance and you're going to have harmony once you go through the grieving process. But when somebody calls me and says, it's been 6 months and I've got this precipitating event and now my life is full of destruction, distress, or dysfunction, that's when I think something's missing with the emotions. Have the imaginary conversation between Peter and Judas. And Peter walks up to Judas and says, I can't believe you told those guys you knew Jesus. Judas could respond, I can't believe you told those guys you didn't. The night that Jesus was arrested, only one of the 12 disciples admitted knowing him. And that was Judas. He walked up to him in the moonlit garden and kissed him and said, that's him. The rest of them scattered like a covey of quail. And Peter stands there in that firelight in the courtyard screaming, I don't know the man, I don't know the man, I don't know the man. He repents and weeps bitterly. And 50 days after the resurrection, he's presenting the first gospel sermon. Judas, who admitted knowing him, says, this means this about me, this means this about the consequences, this means this about my action. He goes out and he self-destructs. So when somebody's dealing in a crisis, whether it's you or I'm dealing with somebody in a crisis, you've got to say, okay, what happened? And what emotions is it producing? And do those emotions produce balance and harmony? Or are they producing destruction, distress, or dysfunction? And if you end up with destruction, distress, or dysfunction, then I want you to look at this little thing right here. That's the significant part of dealing with crisis, because what that is your perception filter. When things happen to us, we run them through we get that implicit meaning based on our perceptions. What you perceive affects what you see stronger than what you see affects what you perceive. I'll say that again for the Kentucky fans. What you see does not have as much power over what you perceive as what you perceive has over what you see. No one who doesn't believe in Bigfoot has ever seen him. If I'm sitting in a tree stand and something walks by me in the woods, I've got some choices. That's a bear. That's a guy in a gorilla suit. That's a guy in a ghillie suit. That's my wife's mom. I've got all kinds of options I can go when I see creatures in the woods. But a guy who believes there's this large, undocumented primate in North America goes, hey, I saw Bigfoot. Well, it could have been a bear. It could have been a guy in a gorilla suit. It could have been a guy in a ghillie suit. And never mind. There's another, you could see those things. So what you perceive affects what you say this means to me. See, when Joseph's brothers sell him into slavery, the plan is, hey, let's tell Dad something killed him. They don't really tell him that. When they go tell Dad what happened, they take Joseph's coat, it's dipped in blood, and they say, you recognize this coat? And the old man says, this means my son is dead. It means he's been torn by a wild animal. I don't know how you get torn by a wild animal and your coat stays intact. That's some straight up ninja lion stuff there. Snatch him out of that coat. And then he says, it means I'll never be happy again. I will go to my grave mourning. I'll start here, and when I end at the grave, I'll have mourned the whole way. I'll never be happy again. That misinterpretation of that event, what this means to me, affects him the rest of his life. When his brothers come to Egypt, Joseph asks them, do you have another brother? Now, that's not the story you get in the narrative, but when they explain to their father why they have to take Benjamin back to Egypt, they say, the man plainly asked us if we had another brother. Is Joseph asking about himself? Or does he know about Benjamin? These dudes walk into his throne room, and he recognizes them. He goes, so, you're all the son of woman. You got another brother? Will you tell me about me? He wants to know that message. Well, they don't tell him about him. They tell him about Benjamin. Oh, I've got another brother. I've got a Benjamin from the same mother. I see him. And if I don't see him again, you'll never see my face again. You ever wondered what Joseph was planning there? You ever wondered why Joseph acts like such a squirrel around his brothers? The whole, I'm going to hide your money in your sack. I'm going to give you my cup. I'm going to do this. Yeah, have you ever thought about that? Again, I'm in Libby Orbison territory again. You don't like me to contrive this. I think Joseph's plan was, I'm going to get Benjamin here. I'm going to plant my diviner's cup. I'm going to send you on your way. I'm going to send them to pull you over. Hey, you've stolen my master's cup. No, we haven't stolen any cups. Well, we're going to search the car. And here's the deal. The person that we find is going to be my slave forever. These are innocent men. They'll say, yeah, fine, we agree to that. They find the cup in Benjamin's, and they take Benjamin back to Egypt. Now, what is this guy's track record? If a little brother goes missing, these guys don't care. He gets Benjamin back to Egypt and says, look, Benjamin, I'm your only real brother. We have the same mother and the same father. These guys abandoned me years ago. They abandoned you. You were in trouble. Nobody fought for you. I'm going to adopt you and live forever. Let them starve to death in the desert. I mean, what's going through Joseph's mind? He's wearing the coat of many colors one day and disappears off the face of the earth, and nobody comes looking for him. He doesn't know Dad was told he was dead. He didn't know they told him Dad he was eaten by a lion. When this takes place, and he hadn't heard anything from home. Spit on those brothers. But when he brings Benjamin back, and Judah walks in that throne room and says, you can't keep this boy. I made a promise to our dad. We lost a brother before, and it like to killed him. And I made a promise to Dad that nothing would happen to this boy, and if you've got to have one of us as slave, you take me. And all of a sudden, what Joseph thinks of the character of his brothers crumbles. And he cries so loudly that he has to run the Egyptians out of the room. And he cries so loudly they hear about it in Pharaoh's house. Because what he thought was true about his brothers, and he thought this is what this meant, and he thought this is a character of them, it all goes away, and instead of adopting one brother, he adopts 75 people. If you read the Septuagint, the number will be 70, one will be 75. It's because they count a couple of grandkids in this thing, and Benjamin and Manasseh. But in Joseph's two sons, and the number that gets you to 75. But Joseph has this preconceived idea. Jacob had this preconceived idea, and every one of their preconceived ideas said, this means this about me. Well, if you have a meaning that is not true, you end up with destruction, distress, and dysfunction. Everybody that is in crisis and thinks about killing themselves has an implicit belief that is based on an event, and the meaning they've assigned to it is not valid. And so when you run into crisis with people, you ask, hey, what happened? I bet nobody understands how scared, how upset, how frightened, how disappointed, how despondent, how lonely you feel, whatever it is. And you listen to them, let them talk, let them vent, let them pour out their soul. And then you say, what does this mean to you? And you understand what it means to them. And then at some point you lovingly, patiently, and don't rush this process, you simply challenge, does this mean what you think it means? And if they come to a valid meaning, their emotions will lead them to balance and harmony. If they have an invalid meaning based on their perceptions, they're going to end up with destruction, usually self-destruction, some kind of distress, and some kind of dysfunction. What does your past mean about you? What does your past say about you? So we don't let our past control us. And I don't know, there are some immediate precipitating circumstances that when you get through a 24-hour crisis, the suicidal ideation usually goes away. The most people I deal with who are dealing with suicidal thoughts have linked into some kind of guilt, some kind of trauma, some kind of tragedy, and because this happened or didn't happen, this means that about me. I'll show you another thing about implicit meanings. In my truck is a candy bar. That's a simple statement. But your mind has the capacity to create meanings out of that statement. Those of you who know what my truck looks like, a little black Toyota Tacoma with a spider sticker in the window, pictured my truck. Those of you who don't know what the tactical Toyota looks like, usually picture me in a large white jacked up truck. I guess they think all short guys drive big jacked up trucks. And some of you invented a candy bar. I said, in my truck is a candy bar, and some of you saw a Snickers and a Butterfinger or a Reese cup or Three Musketeers. There's always one engineer in the room who says, well, if it's in your truck, it's melted. It's in a cooler, so leave me alone, all right? And then in the unspoken part of your mind, you said, if he has a candy bar in his truck and it's my favorite fantasy candy bar, if I could go out there and break into that truck, I get that candy bar. And now we're hungry, we're eating a candy bar in our mind, right? That's what your mind has the ability to do. And then we say, in my past, this happened or didn't happen, I did or didn't do, I said or didn't say, I was there or I wasn't there. And in our minds, we create this scenario that we could go out there and do something with our past. I'm near Oakman, Alabama. I think the crime rate's pretty low. I probably have a 97% chance that my truck is out there. I got a higher than 75% chance there's snacks in my truck. And if you could get out there and get in my truck, we could have snacks. I'm 100% assured that your past isn't out there. And you walk out of this building tonight and walk all the way to Huntsville, you won't find your past. And you can't get into it, and you can't manipulate it, and you can't do anything about it. Leave your past in your past. I don't care what was done or not done, said or not said. I don't care what was done to you. I don't care what was done with you. I don't care what was done for you. I don't care what wasn't done for you. Your past ain't out there. Quit letting your mind take you into the past. You can't get to your past. My friend Troy and I often get invited to come to people's properties and look and see if there's climbable rocks. If you're an amateur rock climber, never take all your gear to go look at a rock you've never seen. Because people will tell you, it's huge, and it's not. It's a cliff, and it's a gravel pit. Okay? Walk in there with as light a gear as you can, because sometimes there's not going to be cliffs there. But we've been all over the country looking for rocks. You ever received directions from a person in rural America? Yeah. We had a guy tell us, you go right down there where they cut that tree down last year, turn left, and go by the new chicken house. I said, sir, how am I supposed to know a new chicken house from an old chicken house? He said, the age of the chickens, dummy. And he dead level meant it. We were up on the Cumberland Plateau looking for this place, pulled up to this little 10-sided garage with those round circle pumps on it. Guy there in a pair of overalls had his thumbs tucked in his galluses. I told him what we were looking for. He goes, I don't believe you can get there from here. Now, I suspect that construct is invalid. I think you can get there from anywhere. But this guy rocked on those hills and goes, I don't think you can get there from here. Let me tell you something about your past. What God says about your past. Psalm 103, verse 11. For as the heavens are high above the earth, so great is his mercy toward those who fear him. If you can measure the proportionate distance between the heavens and the earth, that's the volume of mercy that God has. That's a cubic volume of mercy, as high as the heaven is above the earth. As far as the east is from the west, he has removed our transgressions from us. As far as the east is from the west, God has taken the things that you regret, the things that you've done in your past, and he's put them away from you. Now, if you take a little round globe and you put your finger on Oatman, Alabama, and you start moving north on the globe, at some point you will move south on that globe. If you take a globe and you put your finger in Oatman, Alabama, and you start moving south, at some point you'll move north. But if you take a globe and you put your finger on Oatman, Alabama, and you start moving east, your compass will always read east until you turn around and go the other direction. As far as the east is from the west, I have removed your transgressions or your past from you. You can't get there from here. God has taken those things that we've let define our lives as harm, hurt, sin, failure, regret, and said, if you've given it to me, I've removed it. And it's as far away as the east is from the west. And you can't get there from here. So if you're dealing with thoughts of self-harm, or you're dealing with guilt, or you're dealing with something that you can't reconcile and find peace in your life, please understand that's not a mechanism, that's not a function from God. Godly sorrow works repentance, leads to salvation, not to be regretted. And once you've given it to God, God takes it and he puts it in a place so far away from you, you literally can't get there from here, because God's moving you along in a positive direction. And if you deal with somebody who is wanting to end their life because of a regrettable event or a failure or a choice or something that they can't get past, please let them know what God has done with our past. Please let God know what's been done for us and with us. And as far as the east is from the west, this doesn't have to mean what you think it means. In fact, sometimes it doesn't mean anything at all. But sometimes we have these implicit beliefs, we have these implicit messages, and we have these ideas about our worth, and it has nothing to do with the value statement God puts on us. A guy made this famous on the internet, and I just blatantly plagiarize it. But let's say that I pulled out a $100 bill. And let's say theoretically I had a $100 bill and I was willing to part with it. Is there anyone in the room who would like to be in possession of a $100 bill that I would give away? Anybody take that? Young lady nod her head. Had one little kid stand up, raise his hand. I said, it's not that kind of fellowship, kid. Sit down. Anyway, so if I was going to give out a $100 bill, would you take it tonight? Who would take it if I was going to give out a $100 bill? Got a young lady? All right? Suppose I told you that about 80% of U.S. currency had trace amounts of cocaine on them because of the drug traffic. And this $100 bill would probably have some trace amounts of cocaine on it. Would you still be willing to put that $100 bill in your pocket? I got some. The young lady still wants that money. This young lady still wants that money. All right? Suppose I said that this particular $100 bill had been used in sex trafficking. It had been involved in white slavery, the buying or selling or using that money to get people sexual favors. Would you still be interested in that $100 bill? Suppose I tore the corners off of it, spit on it, crumpled it up, threw it in the floor, and ground it under my foot. Would you still be interested in that $100 bill? Well, yeah. Because you know why? Because when you unfold it and you dust the dirt off of it, on the back of it says United States Treasury, in God we trust. And it's still worth $100. It doesn't matter what's been done to it, and it doesn't matter what's been done with it. It has an inherent value of $100 based on the stamp that's on it. I don't care what's been done to you, and I don't care what's been done with you. You have a stamp, the young man in his prayer, that we were created in the image of the most beautiful being in the universe. You have a stamp on you that says, I have inherent value. And my value comes from my maker, not from the mistakes I made. My value comes from his image, not how I imagine myself to be. My value comes from an inherent connection with the God of the universe that he sent his son to die on the cross for. And it doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter what's been done to you. And it doesn't matter what's been done with you. God says, I've given you permanent, lasting value. And I can redeem that value if you'll get out of your past and come to me. As far as the east is from the west, I've removed your sins and transgressions from you. You can't get there from here. So quit trying to go back to your past and start living for the future that God has planned. And the future that God has planned is eternity with him, prepared from the foundations of the world. Prior to him saying, let there be light, God designed a way to redeem us, reconcile us, and bring us home. Don't let your past control your future. Let God's plan be what's in your future. And if you have given up on your worth, and if you've given up on what your value is, review yourself through a different perception. What do you mean to God? For God so loved the world that he gave his son. And it doesn't matter what you've done. God sent his son to redeem, to forgive, and if we'll just obey and be baptized, we can walk away from that past. And that past is as far as the east is from the west. Walk away from your past. Come back to God while we stand, while we sing.